Hisense U7Q PRO is one of the most anticipated TVs among people looking for strong specifications at an attractive price. This model looks impressive, offering specs that are hard to find from most manufacturers in this price range. 165Hz panel, low input lag, hundreds of dimming zones, over 1000 nits in HDR. It all sounds great, but we've seen promises like this before. The real question is, how does it perform in practice? Today, we'll be thoroughly testing this exact 65-inch model. We'll compare it with other mini LEDs and with a studio monitor that costs around $35,000. Thanks to that, we'll objectively check where it truly deserves praise and where compromises come into play. There will be specific numbers, clear measurements, and real comparisons, no marketing tricks here. Let's dive into the test. Today's episode is sponsored by Hisense, a brand known not just for TVs but also for short-throw projectors, soundbars, and home appliances popular in the Polish market. I know such partnerships can raise credibility questions, so let me clarify this right away. We conducted the test on a unit purchased from a store, not provided by the manufacturer. The partner had no effect on the scenario, results, or our opinions. Companies collaborating with our portal could have purchased our time to prepare an episode like this one, but they only get to know the script, measurements, and conclusions at the moment of the premiere. As you'll see in a moment, this test will certainly not be uncritical. The Hisense U7Q PRO has a fairly typical minimalist design. The bezels around the screen are thin and made of metal. The central stand is also metal, though the manufacturer added a plastic cover to it, which in my opinion slightly ruins the effect. The design doesn't include a modular leg system or the ability to adjust the base width, unlike some other TVs. Instead, the U7Q PRO stands on a single central leg, which has the clear advantage of not needing too wide a piece of furniture. However, it's important to check if the object where we want to place the TV is deep enough. The casing doesn't include brushed aluminum or any luxurious finishes, and that's not surprising, since that's not the focus of this model. Performance is the main focus here, yet the overall design remains cohesive and visually attractive. The remote is a well-known Hisense controller, with lighting and a solar panel on the front. It might look a bit bulky compared to the more minimalist designs of competitors, but it definitely makes up for it with functionality. Everything is in its place. Personally, I like having extra function buttons or the option to change inputs with a single click. The tested TV variant is the 65-inch version, and that's quite specific information for you, as it has a VIDAA-type panel. You'll ask me why it's specific, because as far as I know, the 75-inch model already comes with an ADS panel, and that means certain differences. A bigger screen may have lower contrast and blacks, but better viewing angles and a sharper image in fast motion. Panel lottery is not fun, but it's currently a common phenomenon in the market among many manufacturers. It applies to both QLED and OLED screens. You can check the panel yourself. Just hold your phone camera up to the screen, zoom in, and you should see the shape of the subpixels. This one's a VA panel and this one's an ADS panel. Let's test the 4K HDR performance on streaming apps like Netflix, HBO Max, and Amazon Prime. The first thing that catches the eye is the really high screen brightness. In the factory filmmaker mode, we achieved a maximum of 1600 nits, and after professional calibration, even a bit more. Because 1689, it significantly boosts the light effects. Now, see this comparison. In a dark room, we'll place a Sony HX3110, worth $35,000 next to the TV. On this screen, the biggest Hollywood productions are created. When we display the same series, it turns out that the brightness really doesn't differ much between these two screens. As I mentioned earlier, we're comparing more conservative film and series materials here, for which the film crew ultimately decided to set the lighting effects at a maximum level of up to 1000 nits. That fits within the TV's capabilities. However, more films are now being made with higher brightness levels, reaching up to 4000 nits. Here, as expected, the studio monitor clearly shines, but screens with such high brightness levels cost significantly more than the Hisense U7Q PRO. On the tested TV, even such movies look fantastic because it has another great feature: so-called static tone mapping, which ensures that even if it can't display a certain brightness level, it still preserves visible details in the whites. No issue there, as the screen supports both Dolby Vision and HDR10+. In darker scenes, the screen loses a bit of its HDR charm, as small points of light are dimmed to maintain better black levels. That said, the majority of mini LED screens function similarly, which makes this a standard industry compromise. Ultimately, HDR viewing is highly successful on the Hisense U7Q PRO. In its price range, it doesn't have much competition on the market, especially if we're looking for something that supports HDR not just in name, but actually delivers strong visual effects. High usable brightness isn't just beneficial for HDR content. This feature of the TV also allows it to perform exceptionally well in brightly lit rooms. 500 nits is enough to comfortably watch during the day, even if we have large windows. Only if we position the TV directly across from a large south-facing window could it become less legible, though the matte coating handles it quite effectively. It's satin finished and, as you see, reduces reflections well. Though somewhat mirror-like, they're darkened and slightly blurred. The Hisense U7Q PRO uses mini LED backlighting, which allows the panel to dim or brighten in a very large number of independent zones. This significantly improves black levels and reduces light blooms, enhancing scene dynamism. The number of zones we counted in the 65-inch model is 560, and according to leaks, the larger 85-inch version could potentially have up to 1,200 zones. That's a very good result in this class. But what does it mean in practice? Let's start this time with contrast measurements in real movie scenes. You can see that the TV practically reduces black to zero, delivering the impression of infinite depth in certain scenes. It also handles more challenging situations, like black color surrounded by bright elements, whether in the center of the image or in film strips. Now let's test real video files. It can be summed up like this. The TV provides a deep, almost pitch black level, closely resembling OLED screen quality. However, this comes at the cost of making it difficult to spot details within it. The panel dims the background so aggressively that the subtleties hidden in the shadows can only be seen in a perfectly darkened room. But when we turn on some light, it becomes much harder to see the image. I'm not sure how much YouTube's compression will allow you to notice this effect precisely, but it's exactly as I'm saying. It's an intentional trick from the manufacturer to deliver a better experience to the user, and personally, I think it does the job. Take a look at how this scene from the movie pan appears, with a starry sky, which is usually very problematic for mini LEDs. Or the subtitles in The Revenant. The manufacturer labels the Hisense U7Q PRO as a mini LED TV with a quantum dot layer. They're specifically PFSLEDs, a proven and reliable solution. In the tested TV, they deliver rich and vibrant colors, with measured color gamut coverage reaching over 94%, DCI-P3 and around 72% BT 2020 coverage. While pricier TVs offer richer colors, most content stays within the P3 range, just 6% from full coverage. The matter of colors is inseparably linked to what we find in every television. Picture modes. Of course, the foundation for achieving good colors is stepping out of the ECO mode that the European Union imposed on us. Next, we can freely tweak all the parameters depending on what suits us best. I'll evaluate the filmmaker mode, which closely resembles that expensive studio monitor, but I'll primarily focus on how this model performs after professional calibration, which will load into the cinema mode, because that's exactly when every TV reveals its full potential. The U7Q PRO delivers SDR from terrestrial TV and HDR from streaming or Blu-ray in a strikingly natural manner. The colors we see in nature, like green grass or blue sky, are just as we know them. There's no issue with generating bold artificial colors like that flame from Mad Max. You won't notice any strange tints in the whites or shadows, but without calibration, you can expect the white neutrality to end up slightly worse overall, which all color shades follow. The unit we received had a noticeable blue dominance, which made the skin tones appear paler and slightly more pink than usual. The elevated gamma darkened the image, making it harder to spot details in the shadows. In HDR mode, the TV automatically brightens the image, since dynamic tone mapping is activated in every mode by default. This makes scenes noticeably oversaturated. While not everyone sees it as a downside, most agree calibration brings much greater naturalness. Still, there's one nuance that can't be changed. Hisense aggressively adjusts the brightness curve. As a result, the image is often boosted in highlights and dimmed in shadows. It's a standard technique to add more vibrancy to the film material. And while the boost, which you can notice compared to a studio monitor, isn't such a big issue, the darkening of details, which I already mentioned when discussing the topic of blacks, that is a certain issue. The screen very slowly transitions out of black, which is why scenes, whether in games or movies, become visible later than they should. If we're watching in a dark room, where our eyes are sensitive to light, the issue can be downplayed. But if our room has daylight conditions, it might happen that we won't notice parts of the image. Like in this comparison. This test part is crucial, maybe even the most important for many planning to buy a TV. No matter what we primarily do with the screen, whether we watch TV, series, movies, play games, or are only interested in sports, there's always this phenomenon called posterization that will annoy us. Hisense definitely has a few aces up its sleeve. It's the TV with the best gradation we've tested since last year, and it rightfully scored a solid 9.5 out of 10 in this test. No matter if we played challenging tonal transitions in bright scenes or dark ones, it was practically flawless everywhere. The transitions were smooth, and I couldn't spot any posterization. Nothing annoyed or distracted. and I must point out that in this regard, the majority of other TVs leave much to be desired. If you notice any issues on your screen, know that it's solely because of YouTube's video compression process. The perfect gradation of the TV matrix is only the beginning of what the U7Q PRO can do. The MediaTek Pentonic 800 processor used in it has a fairly effective feature for enhancing tonal transitions in low-quality materials. Because, this phenomenon doesn't necessarily come from the TV's panel, it could also be an issue with overly compressed video material. And here comes into play a feature called Smooth and Gradient Image, which helps to eliminate the issue of these irregular tonal transitions. With effective scaling, even SD resolution images or low-quality material from the web become watchable. Image processing is definitely another strong point of the tested TV. The Hisense U7Q PRO is a television that was also designed with gamers in mind. This isn't just an empty slogan. Its gaming features are extensive and could easily shame more expensive rivals. On board, we find 4 full-fledged HDMI ports with full bandwidth. This way, we won't have any issues connecting 2 consoles and other modern devices. Not many manufacturers offer as many as 4 inputs with complete functionality. Furthermore, it supports 4K at 120, 144, and even 165 Hz, a new feature this year for PCs. At the highest frequency, small fonts aren't perfectly crisp, but motion smoothness and sharpness improve noticeably. Take a look at this comparison of photos showing a fast-moving object from left to right. You can observe some motion blur, as with any LCD screen, but it's noticeably less than the average in this market category. Mentioning features like VIDAA or automatic game mode is probably just a formality. The manufacturer also introduced a bold and innovative Full HD 288 Hz mode. That's not a slip of the tongue, 288 Hz. The use case will probably be niche, and the response time of the panel already somewhat limits achieving an even sharper image in motion, but if we wanted to use the screen for competitive PC gaming, why not? As for input lag, it's very low. Measurements in game mode showed less than 20 milliseconds at a 60 Hz signal, and just under 10 milliseconds at the much more popular 120 Hz. Pro gamers achieve these results. The TV supports both HDR10 and Dolby Vision. One small drawback here, the absence of HGIG support prevents the TV from disabling receiver-side tone mapping. In practice, this can lead to a slight overexposure or flattening of details in very bright areas of the image if the game was designed with HGIG in mind. I talked more about this in a recent episode on optimizing console settings with a TV, and to Hisense owners, I simply suggest setting the console value to 1500 nits. Then HDR games look the most impressive. The TV also offers a sleek game bar with the ability to quickly change gaming settings. With it, you can switch VRR modes, check the current resolution and refresh rate, and activate the on-screen crosshair. Importantly, no features are blocked. Unlike some Sony models, you don't have to choose between Dolby Vision and VRR. In the U7Q PRO, everything works seamlessly together, as it should. Now, let's dive into the OS. It's always a hot topic, and for good reason, we use it every single day after all. So, the Hisense U7Q PRO, just like all their TVs sold across Europe, runs on the VIDAA system. Europe's the keyword here. As we noticed in foreign reviews, particularly from the US or Asia, Hisense often features Google TV there. But here we find VIDAA, and that's no reason to complain at all. Because although it might seem like a relatively new brand on our market, maybe with the system added as an afterthought, that couldn't be further from the truth. VIDAA is now a developed and polished operating system, and above all, one of the fastest. Switching sources, opening apps, entering settings, it's nearly instant. There's no lag or freezes here, unlike Google TV, which often struggles on cheaper devices. Second, VIDAA has features not standard in 2025, like recording channels to USB from built-in tuners. Even TVs from other brands don't include this anymore. Of course, there's AirPlay, screen mirroring, and everything works just as it should. Voice search works in Polish. It also supports Dolby Atmos and DTS:X. More brands are dropping the latter, making it more difficult to route sound to an amp or soundbar. It's a closed system, so it naturally comes with its limitations. First, we'll install applications that aren't natively on the TV. Right now, 11 Sports, Spotify, and Tidal are unavailable. However, the app list changes almost every month, so it might change over time. Shortly after this episode airs, my words might no longer hold true. Always check our website for the latest updates and details. If you were worried about the Chinese OS, seriously, no need. VIDAA's got it covered. The U7Q PRO truly excels in sound quality, setting itself apart by clearly surpassing what you'd expect from the mid-range standard. The speakers play clearly and quite loudly. Of course, there's a bit of a lack of bass tones, but it's not really dramatic with them, as the measurement in our lab shows. Listen along with us for a moment. Of course, it's not a TV that will replace a home theater setup or even a high-quality soundbar. There aren't any, by the way. However, we can easily connect another audio device and enjoy better sound. The TV supports all HDMI audio codecs, and the manufacturer provides plenty of their own options. To sum up, the Hisense U7Q PRO is a TV that could set a new benchmark for the mid-range mini-LED segment. Priced at around $1,250 for a 65-inch model, it offers good speed, real HDR brightness up to 1,600 nits, excellent blacks thanks to hundreds of dimming zones, and a wide color palette, wide calibration options, decent factory modes, full 4K at 65 Hz with low input lag, and full HD up to 288 Hz. What truly sets this TV apart is its exceptional tonal transition quality and features that significantly enhance old, low-quality films. This prevents posterization, which annoys even the least attentive viewers. The manufacturer should really emphasize this feature much more prominently on their website. The competition often writes things like 18-bit image processing for smooth tonal transitions. And then what? The scenes from Blu-ray movies have flaws that we won't encounter on the U7Q PRO. Alright, so we've covered the pros. Now what about the cons? A few points came up during the test. There was talk about excessive color enhancement that can't be turned off, and issues with black detail clarity. And finally, the lack of HGIG, which makes configuring with the console more difficult. But I think many buyers might not even notice that. However, the poor viewing angles won't go unnoticed. The 65-inch VA model loses saturation and grays out dark elements even slightly off the screen's axis, making the image look washed out. This issue affects the whole mini LED segment, even at much higher prices. Only OLEDs or certain significantly more expensive screens feature coatings that enhance this aspect. Therefore, I can honestly say the Hisense U7Q PRO is a very solid mini LED TV in its price range, not just on paper, but also in practice. For those looking for a versatile TV for movies, sports, and gaming without overspending, it's one of the most sensible choices in 2025. And that's exactly why the screen proudly earns our portal's Everyday Hero award, which it truly and honestly deserved. See you soon.